Hello and welcome everyone. This is Michael, the designer of Shadow and Rune, and today I'm excited to show you how to play the competitive mode of this game. Now, Shadow and Rune has a couple different game modes. We have the competitive mode, and we have the solo and cooperative experience. So today we're going to go over the competitive mode. I recommend watching this how to play video first, as a lot of the rules and mechanics carry over between this competitive mode and the solo co-op mode, with a few key differences, but I think this is good to start, a good place to start. So Shadow and Rune is a 1 to 4 player tactical combat deck building game. So it merges tactical combat with traditional deck building elements. And so you'll see right here we have this battle board where the tactical combat takes place. And of course, deck building, you will start in this game with a very simple, meager deck of coins and shadow bats and build it into something very powerful as you design your own unique engine throughout the game. So Shadow and Rune, in the competitive mode, you can play 1v1, you can play 2v2. In this game, the object is to bring your opponent to 0 life. And so each player, we'll go through an example of a 1v1, but each player starts with 30 health, and yeah, you need to bring your opponent down to 0 life. So before one other thing I want to talk about is that a typical game will last 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes if it's your first time playing, you're learning the rules. And then if you're adding 2 more players for a 2v2 experience, I'd plan up to 45 minutes to an hour. So let's orient you to some of the components that we have on the board here. So first and foremost, we have the battle board. So the battle board is an 18 by 18 inch 4 by 5 grid where the tactical combat takes place and where minions are played. And so you'll have the light and dark side to denote the 2 player sides. And you have these numbers and letters that easily enable you to identify certain spaces. So C3 or B2 or E1. Now, down the center of the board, we have the divider line, which divides the sides for each player. And then we have the melee row and the ranged row. And these are denoted by the symbols that we have here. Okay, in addition to that, we have 4 player boards. So we have that add theme and organization to your space. We have the paladin here, we have the druid, the necromancer, and the mage. So for these player boards, there is a space to put your draw, played, and discard piles, as well as tracking the actions that you have. And in Shadow and Rune, you start with 30 health, and we count down with damage tokens. So there's a space to place your damage tokens. And we have spots for runes and gold. I'm not going to cover this in this video because that is relevant to the solo and cooperative experience. So we have the battle board, the player boards, we have the rule book, we have these damage tokens here. So let's take a look here. So we have 1 damage token, 3 damage token, and 10 damage token. And again, these are applied to both minions and players. You won't need the 10 damage token for minions, but these are used on minions and players. Now we have a spawn token. So anyone that's familiar with Magic the Gathering, this works similar to Summoning Sickness, but spawn token is placed on any minion as soon as it's played on the battle board. Now we have these rune tokens here. And this is relevant for the solo and cooperative experience, so I'll skip over that. And then we have these player tokens, so these player cubes, white and black. And this is used to denote ownership. So if you have multiple minions on the battle board, allied players can denote their ownership by placing these cubes on their cards. In a 1v1 though, this won't be necessary because each player will have their own side of the board. Okay, in addition to that, we have the market mat over here. So this is the supply of cards. In any competitive game, this is the scope, within that game, this is the scope of cards that can be purchased and added to your deck. So this is 16 cards here. There's 3 card types in Shadow and Rune. We have money cards that you see above here. You have minion cards, which persist on the battle board from turn to turn, and then item cards, which are kind of like one-time use cards. So let's talk about this first row here. Now, for every single competitive game, these 4 cards will always be a part of the market supply. So the coin, we have the coin, the stash, the fortune, and the shadow bat. So these are always part of every single game. The coin, it provides you 1 gold. Stash provides you 3 gold. Fortune provides you 5 gold. Okay, so those are the 3 money cards. The rest of the cards can be interchanged between competitive matches to create new different varied loadouts that change the scope of the game, change the different deck engines that you can build, the combinations that you can pursue. So those are the money cards that we have here. Again, money cards provide you with gold with which you can purchase cards to your deck. And in the bottom right, you have the gold cost. So if you wanted to buy another stash, it would cost 3 gold. Let's move on to minions. So minions are they persist on the battle board, and so there's a couple like key icons that I want to go over. So in the top left, you have the action cost for this minion. So action cost is how many actions it's cost to play this card from your hand onto the battle board. So this Dark Wolf costs 3. In the top right, we have the Dark Wolf's attack pattern. So the black square represents its position, and the white square represents its attack pattern relative to its position. So this Dark Wolf attacks diagonally. So if we place this on the battle board here in D2, Dark Wolf would target C3 and E3. Okay, so it attacks diagonally there. And it does, in the bottom left, 1 damage and has 2 health. So the Dark Wolf would deal 1 damage to each of these spaces. And it has 2 health, and this card costs 5 gold. Now, 2 health just means if the Dark Wolf took some damage, this denotes it's taken 1 damage, has 1 health left. If it takes another damage, it would perish, leave the battle board, and go to its owner's discard pile. Okay, so that is the minions. And you can see here we have lots of different attack patterns and effects. Of course, the Dark Wolf also has an effect in the gray box at the bottom. So Stone Golem has the very traditional attack pattern, attacks directly in front of it. The Bone Archer is a ranged kind of unit, skips a space and targets the next one. And so that's what you see there. Okay, now we have item cards. So item cards provide varied strategic benefits from damage to card draw to actions. So let's look at the Plate Boots. The Plate Boots cost 1 action to play. It costs 5 gold to buy. It provides you with a card draw of 3, and you discard a card. You have the Plate Armor, which is actually free to play from your hand. Costs 5 gold to buy. Gives you a card draw and gives you an action. Then we have the Longsword, which is an attack item. The Longsword, you'll notice it has similarly to the minions in the top right an attack pattern. So what this means is the Longsword can target 2 spaces above the divider line. So I can target in this, from my vantage point on the light side, I can target any 2 spaces beside each other in this melee row 3 here, and that's why it says 2 spaces above the divider line. So I could not target anything in this ranged row here, not with this particular item. Okay, and then we have the Goblin Bow, which gives you a little bit more flexibility, more expensive card at 7 gold, but this deal 1 damage to any space. So unlike the Longsword, it can actually target any space on your opponent's side, and also provides you with 2 cards that you can draw. Now, just a couple other things just to note. If a minion targets, so if the Dark Wolf targets the opponent, and in 1 space is empty and 1 space is the Shadow Bat, empty spaces, the damage is dealt to the opposing player. If the space is occupied, it's dealt to the minion. Okay? All right. So these are the cards that are within the scope of the game. These cards here are just cards overflow that would be included in the box that can be swapped out for different types of configurations. Okay, now over here we have some other cards. We have the map cards here. I'm not going to go into this too much. I'll cover this in the solo cooperative how to play video. But these are cards you won't need for the competitive mode. So, all right, let's talk about the player turn. So there's 5 main phases to the player turn. So first you have the prepare phase. This phase is where you remove spawn tokens and resolve any start of turn effects. Now you always skip this on the first turn. But if a minion is played, it gets a spawn token on it. Or certain minions like the Stone Golem, at the start of your turn, remove 1 damage from the Stone Golem. So this is an example of the effect that would be executed at the start of the turn in that prepare phase. Okay. We have the main phase where you start with 3 actions. Now the main phase is when you play cards from your hand. So you can play cards, and you can play as many cards as you want as long as you have the actions to be able to play those cards. And again, the action cost is what you see in the top left corner here by the candle. In addition to playing cards, you can gain actions. So in Shadow and Rune, you can deal 1 damage to your minions to gain 1 action. So 1 damage equates to 1 action. You can do this as many times as you want. You're only limited by the health of your minions on the battle board, and this represents a bit of a risk-reward situation where, let's say you really need an action to kind of play all the cards in your hand. You can choose to weaken your minions on the battle board to gain an action. So in this case, if I dealt 1 damage to my Shadow Bat, it would perish and go to my discard pile. But maybe I had a stronger minion like the Dark Soldier. He can take a few more hits. So he could take 1 damage to gain 1 action, 2 damage to gain 2 actions. So that's an option. That's an option if you want to gain more actions. Alternatively, the way to gain actions apart from that mechanic is there are cards that, like I said, grant you actions. Otherwise, you start with 3 actions on your turn in the main and that you can spend in the main phase. And actions do not carry over from turn to turn, so it always resets whether you use them all or not. Now, in addition to playing cards and gaining actions, you can also choose to move minions, and it's 1 action to move 1 space. You can't move diagonally, and you have to end on an empty space. So this Dark Soldier here, I could spend 1 action to move it here. I could also move it through the Shadow Bat to here. That would cost 3 actions, so 1, 2, 3. But you can't. It needs to land on its own space. So that's how you can move minions with actions. And then finally, you can heal minions. You can spend 2 actions to remove 1 damage from a minion. If strategically keeping a minion alive is of value to you, then you can also use that option. Okay, now after the main phase, you have the buy phase. So the buy phase is where you can spend gold from your hand to buy cards from the market supply. Anything you buy automatically goes to your discard pile. But you can buy as many cards as you want so long as you can afford the total. And if you have any leftover gold, it does not carry over to the next turn, just like your actions. And you always start each turn with 0 gold. And you gain gold by drawing those cards and playing them. So you can see the gold cost in the bottom right. And I can buy as many cards as I can afford. Okay, now after the combat or after the buy phase, we have the combat phase. Minions attack left to right from your perspective, starting with the melee, then the ranged row. So ignore that typo there. You start with the melee row, then you move to the ranged row. There's no friendly fire, and as I was saying before, if the space is empty that a minion is targeting, the opponent takes that damage. So no friendly fire. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say the Dark Soldier was placed back here. Now, this Dark Soldier is no longer targeting a space on the opponent's side, it's targeting a space on your side. So in this case, it would not deal 1 damage to you. If there was a minion there, it would not deal 1 damage to your own minion. So you just ignore the attack pattern if it's targeting a space on your side. Okay, now after the combat phase, well, let me just make sure I touch on this. So going left to right, we basically assume there's no spawn token here. Let me just add, so for some more variability here, let's do this, okay? You can see going left to right, Dark Soldier would attack there. The Dark Wolf would attack C3 and E3. Then we'd move to the ranged row. The Bone Archer, it skips a space. It would target C3 here, okay? One other thing I'll just touch on, minions have different kind of effects, abilities, buffs, and this is part of the fun of the game is exploring these combinations. But you can notice that the Dark Soldier, its ability says adjacent minions deal +1 damage. Adjacent, as defined in the rulebook, is minions to the left and the right. So if this Dark Soldier was positioned here, it would then buff this Dark Wolf so it deals +1 damage. So now it's not only targeting 2 spaces, but it's dealing 2 damage to each of those spaces for a total of 4. So that's where that can get powerful. Additionally, if the Dark Soldier was back here, it'd be buffing this Bone Archer. This Bone Archer would target C3, but instead of doing 1 damage, it would do 2 damage. Now, final phase is the refresh phase. You discard your hand, you draw 5 again. So after you've played all your cards, you would refresh, draw another 5 cards, and then end your turn. Now, one thing, maybe I'll just kind of go through an example here. So the starting deck in Shadow and Rune is 8 coin cards and 2 Shadow Bats. Okay. Okay. So let's start out here. I'm going to draw my hand, 5 cards. So I got 4 coins and 1 Shadow Bat. I start with 3 actions here, so I got my block placed on the 3. So there's really only one thing I can spend. I'm going to skip the prepare phase because I have no minions on the battle board. I'm going to move to the main phase. I really only have one thing to spend an action on. That's a Shadow Bat. So I can place it anywhere on my side. So I'm going to I'll place it up front here. I'm going to place a spawn token on it. Move my marker down to 2 actions. Now that concludes the main phase. I'm going to enter the buy phase, and I'm going to spend 4 cards or 4 coins to gain 4 gold. Put it in the played pile. Now I could buy any combination of cards so long as I can afford it. And really, in this situation, I can afford the Echo Dagger, the Mage Robes, the Goblin Guard, the Shadow Bat, and the Stash. Now I want to build up my economy, so I'm going to buy the Stash, and that's going to go directly into my discard pile. Now, when I enter the refresh phase, I should also mention that during the refresh phase, all played cards move to your discard pile. Then I'm going to draw another 5 cards. Okay, set this. Now let's say the player goes, let's say they, on their turn, they instead drew 2 Shadow Bats, and they played let's say right here, right here. Okay. Now my turn, we are going to spend 1 action, and I've got to remember the prepare phase, remove the spawn token. So spend 1 action now and play a Shadow Bat here. Put a spawn token on it. I don't have any other cards to play that cost actions, but I'm going to spend another action and move this Shadow Bat over 1. So now it's going to target this Shadow Bat in B3. I'm going to spend 4 gold, and I am going to buy a Goblin Guard. Goblin Guard, one of its unique abilities is that when it's attacked, it deals damage back. So by default, if a minion attacks another minion, there's no like built-in response mechanic. That needs to be highlighted. That's a unique ability to the Goblin Guard. So I spent that gold. I'm going to take a Goblin card, put it in my discard pile here. Okay, now during the combat phase, we're going to go left to right. So this Shadow Bat is going to deal 1 damage here. Since the Shadow Bat in B3 has 1 health, it's going to go to the opponent's discard pile. This Shadow Bat in D2 has a spawn token, so it won't attack. Okay, now during the refresh phase, I'm going to move all of my played cards to my discard pile. Now you'll notice I don't have a draw pile. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move my discard over to my draw, shuffle it, and draw 5 cards again. All right. So there you have it. That's how you play Shadow and Rune the first couple turns. What you'll notice is that as you play the competitive game, as you build your deck, as you acquire more minions, items, you can really ramp into powerful turns where you're dealing lots of damage. And as the game progresses, you start dealing more and more damage, and just the intensity of the game kind of reaches a tipping point. And so it can be a lot of fun. Okay, one other thing I wanted to just go over in this video is just some of the unique minions. I think one of the great things about Shadow and Rune is the replayability. There's so many different minions, so many different items, which creates varied gameplay experiences for both competitive and the solo and cooperative modes. And so each minion is different in terms of its action cost, gold cost, its damage, health, its attack pattern, and its effect. And same for the items. And so there's a lot of different exploration in terms of combining different minions, different items in your deck, and trying to build the most efficient deck build. Are you going to go heavy on economy to acquire a lot of gold so you can scale in the late game? Are you going to try and rush your opponent by acquiring minions early? Are you going to acquire powerful, more expensive, beefy minions? Or are you going to acquire more of an item kind of build? So there's lots of different combinations. And so let's take a look at some of the minions here and some of the different effects. So we talked about the Goblin Guard, we talked about the Dark Wolf. The Stone Golem is a great defensive unit because it regenerates health at the start of each turn. So not only can it regenerate health, but if you're using the Stone Golem if you're choosing to deal damage to the Stone Golem to gain actions, it can be kind of like an action farming mechanic. We have the Bone Archer, which it's really easy to play with the 0 action cost. So it's very easy to play if you drew a bunch of these in your hand. you're guaranteed to play them all in a turn. It also has like a regeneration mechanic where Bone Archer can be spawned from your discard pile for 1 action. So this card doesn't actually even need to be in your hand to play it. You can play it from your discard pile, which is another great benefit. We talked about the Dark Soldier, which buffs its adjacent minions with +1 damage. We also have the Old Crone, which for 7 gold, so it's a more expensive late game minion, but it targets 3 spaces right in front of it. So it does 3 damage, 1 to each one of those spaces. And not only that, but the melee minion opposing the Old Crone deals 1 less damage, so it makes it even harder to take this minion out. Let's talk about Mage Robes. So Mage Robes is a card that enables you to reduce the number of cards in your deck. So there's this exhaust mechanic. So you may exhaust 1 card in your hand, draw 1 card. So what the Mage Robes essentially allows you to do is you can choose 1 card in your hand and exhaust it. Now exhausting basically means you would remove this card from your hand, from your deck, and return it to the market supply. So it's no longer in your deck. You're no longer going to draw that on future turns. Also allows you to draw 1 card. So again, ton of different replayability and variability with all the different minions, and exploring their different effects and how they kind of synergize together is all part of the experience, part of the fun, for both the competitive mode and for the solo and co-op mode. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video explaining how to play the competitive mode in Shadow and Rune. Hope to see you in our solo and cooperative how to play video.